Hi there, Macam here for my 39th video for Wyrmberg Games, and today I'll be bringing you a box contents and review of Terraria, the board game, by Paperfort Games and Relogic. For those who don't know, Terraria is a blatant rip-off of Minecraft, but 2D, that did get the blessings of the creators of Minecraft. And it is very much its own thing, and some would even argue that it's better than Minecraft. But that's an argument for another time. We have had a couple of Minecraft-based board games. We finally have a Terraria one, which I backed, and it turned up in the post about a week or so ago. Now, normally I'd do an unboxing, but I've already unboxed it, played with it, and so this time it's going to be more of a what's in the box, and what do I think of the game itself. It's a cooperative game for 1 to 4 players, although due to the cooperative nature, more players can be involved in the decision making. And it reckons it's about 45 minutes per player. This is woefully underestimated. Okay, it was our first playthrough, but the 4 of us took 5.5 hours to play it on our first go. I've subsequently then played a single player campaign, which I saw right through to the end, and that took me most of the week. And it's for those who are 10 and over. So first up, there's a rulebook, and at 40 pages long, it's quite a hefty rulebook. It's pretty well laid out, although I do find that some of the instructions you do have to search for. I didn't find it quite as intuitive as other rulebooks are, but it is beautifully illustrated. Some of the key things that you'll encounter in the game, including the Wall of Flesh, which is the end game aim. There's a nice one of the Eye of Cthulhu there. Yeah, not a bad rulebook. It does come with the glossary, which helps, but it's not as complete as it could have been, but not bad. There's the all-important how to put everything back in the box, and there is a lot of stuff. There's a foam spacer. One of the add-ons I could have had was a whole bunch of wooden character meeples to personalise the gameplay even further than just the standard 4 that you start with. I decided I spent enough on it, but there is a space in the box for that, had I included that in my order. Later down the line, maybe at the UK Games Expo at the end of May this year, I might accidentally purchase a pack, I don't know, but there's a space for it, which I think is a nice thought. There are 3 trays of bits with a nice lid on them, and they do stack on top of each other. Now if I tip it up, it shouldn't all fall out, so as long as the reflection is there. So you got the 4 player components, including male and female characters. You can choose which one you want to be. 2 gravestones each, a red heart health counter, a blue star mana counter, the mana and health limiters, because you can increase your health and mana during the course of the game, as well as the 3 debuff icons for poison, fire and ice, as well as 6 resource dice in each player colour as well. And at the top we have the green player dice for attack and defence, and the purple mob dice for attack and defence, ranging from D4 to D20, and they're really nice chunky dice. They're not just purple and green, there is a marbling effect on them as well, so they're good quality. There's the time tracker token, which is the sun or the moon, a whole bunch of padlock tokens to put over chests to say that they've been searched, map tokens which are randomly arranged at the beginning of the game with a question mark side up, and when that area is discovered you flip it over to find out, I'm in the corruption or whatever. And all the standard surface biomes are represented, so you've got the forest where you start, the frozen tundra, the desert, the jungle, and then you choose to either have the crimson or the corruption, or you switch them around and then randomly pick which one. Which is a nice touch, because when you explore Terraria in the video game, you don't know which biome you're going to meet when you cross one. I think the only issue with purists to the game, there is a certain arrangement. The jungle biome isn't until you've gone past the evil biome, whereas in this, because of the random arrangement, the jungle biome could be right next to the forest biome. And of course each biome only features once, you don't go through the desert and then return to the forest again. And the beach biomes do exist, but they're like standard ones on either side of the board, and they don't really do anything. They just represent the edge of the board. There's also some gravestone markers. You don't necessarily have to use these, but they're quite fun to put on the map just to represent where your character dies, and is one of the first things really that kind of indicates that there may well be more coming if this game is successful in the first place. Obviously, because have enough of these in one place, you could end up with ghosts, which don't feature in this. There's also a threat marker, which indicates the level of threat in the game at the one time and how far up it goes each time it is increased, which can be either 1 or 2. For some reason we're given 2 of those, but only 1 is needed. There's also a focus token, which you can use to make the game a little bit more challenging. It's all about having to do particular quests within a certain time period. So all in all, really nice. A good combination of wooden tokens, cardboard tokens, and the plastic dice. I think the only real complaint I've seen is that the artwork for the characters, and this does reflect throughout the entire game, doesn't match the artwork from the game itself, and the artwork on the figures doesn't match the artwork on the character cards, which is a bit weird. But to be honest, when you've got such a small character on a huge playing area, it kind of does sink into insignificance, really. The next tray is the resource tray, and your eye may be straight away drawn to 2 empty slots, which again suggests there is room for extra content coming at some point later on. We have different tunnel lengths here, as a lot of Terraria involves digging. You've got single squares there, and you can swap out lots of singles for a double or whatever. And these are double-sided, oriented different ways, so you always have the flames pointing upwards, which is a nice touch. And we have a lot of the resources. We also have rope tokens, wooden platforms, and houses. From the bog standard little one with the workbench, and the reverse is the resources required to build it. And of course, once you have a workbench in the world, you can then start crafting stuff. And unlike in the original game, you don't actually have to stand near a workbench. It just needs to exist in the world somewhere for it to count. And if you do, you can then build one of these, which provides you with a furnace and an anvil, like so, which will then allow you to build better weapons and armour. And there's a whole bunch of different buildings you can build. We also have pylon tokens, which cost 10 coins to build, and at 4 energy you can then use them, as well as food tokens and bottle tokens, which come into play when you build the respective buildings. Another thing I like about these trays is that everything is slanted a bit, so that it's easy to get your fingers in to get particular pieces out, and all the buildings very cleverly slot into this one section here. A lot of thought has been given into how these trays are arranged. The final token tray is the enemies token tray. Each biome is represented by a different column, and each biome has a depth of 5 tiles. So when you go to a tile and find a monster, you find which biome you're in and which level you're in, and you take one of the tokens from that particular slot to find out what monster you're fighting. The surface has 2 rows for it, one for daytime and one for nighttime. Have your zombies and things in the second row, and the slimes and things in the first row. We also have a whole bunch of wound tokens which you can place on mobs that have health of more than 1, but also go on boss cards as well. So that's really good. There's only 5 tokens per tray at most, although down at the underworld there's only 3. And again, these are all slanted and arranged so they're easily removable and when replaced easily to put at the back of what's already there. Obviously not every single mob from the original game is represented, there's just far too many, but even so there are some omissions which do surprise me. I found the desert biome particularly underrepresented by the ants, and the jungle again is very much underrepresented, but there's no way you can fit everything in it. You need to trade 10 times this size to get everybody in. And another weird design choice is these tokens at the top to denote which column you use are kind of random. So I suppose in a way, as a player, you can choose which order you want them in. But once you've got that order, you don't want to muck about with having to change it. Whereas each row has stickers which you need to put in to start off with. I'm only complete with the symbology of that. You know, you have your surface, which is clouds, and that's quite easy. The underground, which is all tunnels. But then the upper cavern and the lower cavern, I found the symbology too similar. And I did get these confused initially. I didn't find them different enough to really differentiate between the two, although the underworld was pretty clear. Next up is this wonderful removable chest. Get the lid off, and it has most of the cards in the game. I'm not going to go through all of them. I think big in-game players will pick out their character card, and as you see, the artwork has nothing to do with the artwork from the original, and this chap doesn't match any of the figures from the first tray I showed you. But there's a good variety of characters there. You can also get minions, transparent plastic cards, which will sit on top of your character card as an added feature. Nice wad of armour cards, which again sit on top of your character. So there he is with his minion. As well as a whole bunch of vanity cards, if you wanted to use those instead. Now, they don't do anything to your character, they just look cool. And they came with in a special developer pack because I backed the game. Also got a seasonal promo pack as well. Most of these cards are now mixed in with the rest of it now, but that's pretty much what you get. So pumpkin armour, snazzy jumper, and all the rest of it. You've got your starting cards. This is a deck building game as well. So if you choose blue, for example, you get these blue cards. They're all the same, they're just different colours. With your basic starting icons. So green is an action, and of course you can then get better cards as the game goes on. From the guide, the starting NPC, and these will cost 5 coins each, and there's 3 different cards in this deck. And once you spawn the merchant NPC, then for 8 or 15 gold, there's another deck of cards. Each one's unique in this case, which you can then add to your deck. But also loot action cards, which you get from chests or as rewards for achieving objectives. There's 5 levels of them. Despite all the brilliant dividers that they've provided in the game, they hadn't thought to provide dividers for the 5 sections of this, which is a bit of a shame because there is an awful lot of time spent shuffling through this trying to find the right level. There are also some chest cards which are separated out, and so depending on what biome you're in when you find a chest, you pick the card from the relevant area, and then depending on what level you are in that biome depends on what reward you get. So that's really cool. There's a whole bunch of equipment cards. I'm not going to show you them all. Starting axe, you can dig one bit of tree. starting pickaxe you can dig 1 bit of earth, and a starting copper short sword you get to roll 1d4 to attack. And of course you can then upgrade to better and better weapons up to the Knight's Edge, which will allow you to roll 2d8 and a d12. But there's sections for your starting cards, your swords, pickaxes, axes, staves, yo-yos and hooks, stuff you just get from chests, bows and bosses, or what you get from the bee boss. There's also consumable stuff of 4 types, so starting with things like lesser healing potion and throwing knives. Explosives are in there, finishing up in level 4, things like the guide voodoo doll and the gingerbread cookie, which is one that came from the seasonal pack. There are also 4 decks of objectives, and so for the first objective is to chop a tree. These are double-sided, 1 to 2 player or 3 to 4 player, and in this case it's still chop a tree, with an achievement once you've done it of getting 1 gold each for each player, or 2 gold if you do it with 1 or 2 players each. These will get progressively harder as you go down sequentially, and the main object of the game is to complete a number of these tracks. So there's 4 decks. Medium setting is completing 1, hard setting is completing 2. Or if you really want to go for it, you got to summon and destroy the wall of flesh. Early stage, the objectives are fairly straightforward and easy to do, and sometimes you do them without even realising that it's an objective. It's like, well, it's a natural thing to do. Oh, I've just done an objective there, great. But then the difficulty curve does ramp up quite significantly to some quite tough objectives to achieve. Right, back again. You might notice there's a slight light change. I have low battery, so I had to charge the camera a bit. So next up is another box. Take the lid off, and these contain all the bio tiles for the game. So you have your 3 starting surface tiles. They're double-sided, so you know which ones they are, like so, as well as an underground one to go underneath. And that's literally the width of the forest biome, and each biome is 3 tiles wide, and each tile is made up of 3 squares width and are 5 squares high. And your little figures are about 1 and a bit squares high, which is a little bit annoying because when you put the platforms on along these dots there, if you have 2 platforms above each other, the character doesn't quite fit in between. Although all the tokens or the mobs do fit exactly in there quite nicely. And that's more or less what you'd expect to see on most of the tiles. So you'll get, on the surface particularly, trees with a little triangle on to say how much wood you'll get off the trees. There are skulls. Not every tile has a skull on it, which is a spawning point for the mob of that biome and level. There is ore, which with a number telling you how many dig actions are required to dig it. And then there's chests, which tell you how many cards you can draw, and then out of that you can pick which one you want. And once you've checked the chest, you then put a padlock on it to say that is now an empty chest. And of course further down, more of the same. You've got stone there and more copper, another chest, and some cobwebs. You can collect cobwebs just by falling through it or walking through it. And indeed, if you were to fall, landing on a cobweb will stop you getting damage. Beyond that, every biome has its own spot. The underground layer transcends all biomes. It's exactly the same set of cards for each biome at that level, and they're mostly things like ore, tunnels, cobwebs, occasional mob spawning. There's a gem there, there's a chest. Sometimes they're full and sometimes they have tunnels in them. But of course, depending on which biome you're in will depend on what mobs will spawn there. But apart from that, each biome will have 3 tiles for the 3 other layers. So you've got 3 for the surface and 3 for the upper caverns. So there's surface tundra and cavern tundra, for example. And some tiles will be these dustbin tiles, which still require a lot of digging to get through, but they don't give you any resources. Surface desert, the little scorpion there is just there as artwork. And underground desert, again with another dustbin, sandstone, which you don't get any resources from. Surface jungle, underground jungle, which is the only biome that has underground wood, as well as the all-important bee nest. And if you attack the larva in the middle, you'll spawn the queen bee. Surface corruption, cavern corruption, and again with the Eater of Worlds spawning opportunity. Surface Crimson and Brain of Cthulhu spawning opportunity. And neither of those have any of those bramble type areas which do damage if you walk through them. The other double-sided lot are the 2 beaches. I say there's not an awful lot here. There's quite a wood source there, but these very much do represent the edges of the map. And the enormous neoprene map that I also got, I can't show it to you because it's just so huge, have the 5 double-sided starting tiles pre-printed. And finally, the underworld, lots of lava and fire, and the need for lots of platforms. And again, this goes across all the biome types. So the board itself is 15 of these wide and 5 of these tall. So you do need quite a big playing area to play it in, which is why if you do get the neoprene mat, it's already got that space laid out for you. Now in a game, you won't necessarily uncover the entire map. In fact, the last game I played, I didn't even get to a beach, but it depends on what sort of game you play. So these are really nice. I think my only complaint with these is the lack of variety. There's only 3 tiles for each biome for each level, meaning that each time you play the game, you'll uncover the same 3 tiles. They may well come out in different orders, but once you start getting familiar with the tiles, you get to know, well, I've uncovered this, I've uncovered that, but means that the next one will definitely be this. And there's certainly a lot of space left in here for more, but again, there are hints that there may well be coming more. There's no mini biomes like the mushrooms or the spider nests, and of course there's no dungeon whatsoever. I could argue the game's big enough as it is, but be very interested to see if we do get some variance in this mix. And I do like this little box it goes in. It's very, very handy. Next up are 4 gold counters. Go from 0 to 25. That does behoove you to spend your money if you get too high, because then it means anything you do gain will be lost. There's some crib sheets, so a character phase, just reminding you what you can do on your turn. And on the back is the iconography, what all the symbols are, what they mean. And there's 4 of those, so that's 1 per player. And then there's 2 bestiary quick reference sheets. They're double-sided, listing all the creatures, their movement, their attack range, the dice they need to attack with, any debuffs that they will do if they successfully hit, their defense, their health, how much money they reward when they're killed, and other resources or cards. So they're quite good, but there's only 2 of them, and they're double-sided. And in the beginning of the game, when you're all in the same area, you kind of do take turns a bit, but when you start spreading out a little, play can become a little bit more simultaneous, and you do end up fighting over these, where one side is fighting on this side, and the other one's fighting on this side. Someone else is looking at that, trying to just work out what's going on. So really nice to have had 1 per player for that. However, they have done this wonderful bestiary flip chart. Now the bestiary is nicely tabbed. You can flip straight to the section you want to find out what you're fighting and how to fight it. As a repeat of what's on here. But far more interestingly, on the other side is the crafting menu, which tells you what you need to build your various armours, axes and so on and so forth. Having only 1 of these, and this being pretty much the only reference for it, and okay, on the cards themselves of the armour and the equipment, it does say what the resource requirements are. But to have it all in this handy book, yeah, we were fighting over this. So having more than 1 of these or another crib sheet like those would have been nice. Particularly if you're new to the game and you don't know what it is you can craft, this is a really important thing to have. And the fact that such pertinent information is hidden away in here, sometimes being referenced as the bestiary, is perhaps a bit of a mistake. Why this couldn't have been 2 separate books, I don't know. But it's very nicely made. There are 4 player boards in blue, yellowish, white and red. So you put your player card in there, which you then overlay with any armour or minions you get. Your health tracker is on there, and you see you've got a place where you start, and you put your limiter and the padlock, which then can be extended when you get the life crystals, and your mana starts there, which can be extended with the falling stars. And then you have 4 pre-printed resources, and use your special dice in here to count how many up to 5 of each of those resources you can get. And then in a 3 or 4 player game, you can spend money to unlock extra slots, and then from the resource tray you can put in specific resources, or even overlay these ones to replace them. Say if you want lots of gold or bones or something, then you can swap it out, and that's how you keep track of your resources. But you do have a very limited inventory, so you've got to be quite frugal about what you carry, and then spend it when you need to, because otherwise you lose it forever. There's also spaces around it where you put your sword, axe, pickaxe, and your other thing. One restriction is you can only have 1 other thing at a time at the beginning of your turn, so either the yo-yo or the boomerang or your staff or your grappling hook. But once you've got that in place, you can't change that during the rest of that turn. Or your consumable cards go onto here, your potions and stuff. You can ready 1 action card, which sometimes will mean that it has special abilities by sitting here, but other times it means you're guaranteed to have that card next turn. Your draw deck goes on this side, and your discard deck goes on that side. Again, really, really nice. But the only issue is, by the time you've got your board out, particularly again if you've got the neoprene mat, you've got the trays, you've got the books, you've got the boxes, and the other things I've yet to show you, there's a huge amount of table space taken over. There's not necessarily room left for your player board and all the accoutrements to going around the outside of it. Space does run out fast. Then there's this, which is the objectives board. Now the neoprene mat does have a printed area for that, so you just place that on top of it if you want to use this at all, and you put your 4 decks on there, with the other objective of defeating a wall of flesh if you want. And again, all you need to do is complete 1 or 2 of these to win the game, or you can try and do all 4, depends on what you want to do. But 45 minutes per player it is not, if you're doing some serious speed running. And then there's the NPC board. There are only 6 NPCs in this game. The guide is a permanent one, and you always start with the guide, who allows you to buy extra action cards. And the other 6 are the merchant, the nurse, the Goblin Tinkerer, Demolitionist, and the Dryad. And they will spawn with 2 conditions. One, there's an extra house built for them. The guy doesn't need a house. And when you've done certain things, so for the merchant, for example, you need to have a house and one player needs to have at least 10 money in their possession, and then he can spawn. And they will help you with various things during the course of the game, very similar to what they do in the video game. And again, there is a pre-printed area on the neoprene mat for this space. And these are double-sided, so you flip them over when you've spawned them, and then they have what they do on that side, which is very nice. And then there's the time track. So you put your sun in the first one there, and after everyone's had their turn and all actions are done, then the time goes forward 1 spot. You have your map track here, where you put the biome question mark tiles there, which will then lay out how your map will resolve as you discover those new areas. And of course you flip those over once you discover them to tell you what biome you're in. And each player puts 2 gravestones in these slots up there. So if it's 1-player game, it'll be 2. 4-player game, it'll be all 8. Each time a player dies, there'll be an exclamation mark. Each time you get to these times of days, it's an exclamation mark. And what that means is you have your threat tracker starting here. It will move up 1. If it ever gets to the 10, that's the end of the game and you've lost. And in terms of how that is represented to the original video game, it doesn't. There's not really a threat that means if it gets to a point the game is over. However, there is the encroachment of the evil biomes, and maybe it can represent when the whole world has been taken over by the corruption or the crimson. And when the time tracker hits a place with a skull on it, every place where there's a player near a mob spawning area, there will be a mob spawning on that spot. So that's when new enemies enter the area. And again, there's a pre-printed area on the neoprene mat for that. These are all nice chunky dual layered boards, so everything put into place will stay in place. There is ranged combat. So there are 2 ranged guides for medium range to long range. These are reversible depending which way you're going, so you can tell if you're in or out of range. Very nice. And then finally, there are 6 of these little containers containing the bosses. And the bosses are King Slime, the Eye of Cthulhu, the Queen Bee, the Eater of Worlds, and the Brain of Cthulhu, and finally, the Wall of Flesh. Each of these will contain some cards. These are nice, shiny, foily cards explaining the spawning conditions for that boss. In the King Slime's case, it's either when the 5th slime is killed, or the time track has gone through an entire day and has returned back to dawn again. And then there's a 1 and 2 or 3 and 4 player setup instructions on how to get the King Slime up and running. The King Slime's first form abilities, his minion buff card, and a double-sided behaviour card which will flip every turn and they'll have a slightly different attack. Minion tokens, except for the Eater of Worlds, and each turn they will populate one of these buff areas, so the longer the boss is in existence, the tougher it gets. And then the King Slime miniature itself, all the miniatures are modular except for the Queen Bee, because they have different forms in terms of how you're fighting that. So this is when the King Slime first turns up, and then his second form when you start doing some serious damage against him. So really cool. Definitely going to have to paint these guys. So there's the Queen Bee. It's a nice big size miniatures, these, and her minions. The Eye of Cthulhu first form and second form and minion. The Eater of Worlds first form and second form. That one has no minions. The Brain of Cthulhu first form and second form and its minions. And the Wall of Flesh, with its removable eyes and mouth and its minions. So not only have you got everything else out, you've also got at least 5 of these out with the spawn condition on the front, so you know what you've got to try and do. But if you're familiar with the video game, then yeah, it's pretty self-explanatory, so you don't necessarily need these out until you're going to go for it. But the figures themselves are really nicely made, but will definitely benefit from a nice painting. The box itself is really nicely designed. Everything's got a place to go. If you get lost, the instructions on how to put everything back in is very clear. So I can't complain about the quality of the box or the game components at all. What's the game like then? Well, essentially, it does feel a lot like the video game. It's obviously a much smaller world, because no one has a table that big. But because your movements are very much restricted by what action cards you've got, you start with 4 action cards in your hand at the beginning, so you're very limited about what you can do on a turn. But as you get better armour, which will allow you to draw more cards, as your cards get better and they have more actions on them, you get to do more and more as the game progresses. But it can be quite slow at the beginning until you've got the resources you need in order to then progress. And the fact that most of the cards and tokens and miniatures all have a place that can be easily accessed to quickly add to the board or to return to from the board once removed does speed up the gameplay a lot. However, the gameplay is a lengthy process. I highly recommend setting this up in a place where you're not going to use it for the rest of the week or the weekend. And then when you need to leave the game for a bit, it's going to remain undisturbed until you're ready to come back and resume play, because you do need to dedicate a good chunk of time to sit down and play a game all the way through, unless you're absolutely hopeless and you get wiped out pretty early on. The onset of the threat tracker can be quite daunting. A lot of the rewards from objectives, once you get to like the 6th card down, start rewarding the reverse of the track. And certainly the bosses will also reverse the track. However, when a boss is in play, the track will increase by 2 rather than 1. So there is a certain level of risk of bringing a monster in if you're not going to be able to kill it straight away. Also, each boss can only be fought once. You can't just spam the either Cthulhu or the Eater of Worlds like you would normally do in the video game. And once the Wall of Flesh has been destroyed, the game automatically ends and you've won. And as I said earlier, as you start all sitting on the same exact tile, it behooves you to take turns to say, well, I'm going to go this way and do this, I'm going to go this way and dig here, or whatever. But once you start spreading out, one's heading off towards the beach or to the right, one's digging down to the underworld, one's building houses or whatever, you can then have a bit more of a simultaneous play that can theoretically speed up the process. However, with only one set of dice and you're all needing the same dice at the beginning and you're all fighting different things at the same time, you might need to get hold of some more dice of the various sizes to speed up that process. And near the back of the book there are how to mod the game to make it more challenging or easier, and certainly if you're on a quicker game you have better starting equipment and the goals are more achievable, or you can have the objective token to introduce penalties for not achieving an objective within a certain time limit. And there's a QR code at the bottom which will link to online scenarios. There aren't any at the moment, I just checked, but they're going to start publishing some online scenarios to play through as well for those who've got this. So all in all, a fun and rewarding experience that does require a lot of time to play it through. Do you need to know the original Terraria to enjoy this? Well, it depends on, obviously there's an awful lot of, oh, I know this from that, or I'm getting to reenact this but on the table now. Getting the voodoo doll and throwing it into the lava to summon the Wall of Flesh has a certain feel to it, having played it on the computer, or even having the Eye of Cthulhu turning up. It sends you back to the first time that you faced off against that thing that probably definitely killed you the first time you fought it. But at the same time, it's a great exploration game, digging, resource gathering game. You've got 4 different objective tracks, you know, either exploring if you just like exploring, or crafting if you just like crafting. There is a combat one and there's a mining one. So the 4 main aspects of the game are all covered in the objective tracks. So you can go down the ones that are particular to your interests. So it does cater to different play styles in that way. So if you don't want to go down into the underworld and fight the Wall of Flesh, you don't have to. You can win the game without having to do that. In fact, you can win the game with only having fought the King of Slime, which is basically one boss that you can't really avoid. And of course, going forward, there are hints that there may well be more to come. I think there's even reference to a weapon that you can't get in this game. It does suggest that it's going to be available later on. There are some spaces in the trays for something. There is plenty of space in here for more biome tiles, so hopeful there. But other trays are quite full, so I'm not quite sure if they are going to introduce new stuff where it's going to fit in the original box, or we're going to have to get the bigger box to fit all the extra stuff. I don't know. Depends on how successful Terraria the board game is going to be, I suppose, and how much people are going to want more. I'm under no illusions that we're going to get everything from the screen onto the board, but even get things like fishing perhaps, or going up into the clouds or something. I don't know. Anyway, so did you get Terraria the board game? What do you think about it? How do you find it compares to the video game? Or have you only played the video game? Are you now interested in the board game version? Or are you completely oblivious of either, and are you suddenly vaguely interested in one or the other? Comment down below please, but as usual, if you have nothing nice to say, then please keep it to yourself. Thank you, and don't forget to like, subscribe and other YouTubey things if you want. Until next time, see you later.